I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, the FDA nears approval for a second COVID-19 vaccine, officially saying that Moderna's shot is safe and effective. This as the first healthcare workers are receiving Pfizer's shot, and as the U.S. surges past 200,000 cases a day. Plus, the parent of online retailer Wish prepares to go public as Airbnb and DoorDash pull back yet again after their exuberant receptions on Wall Street. And former Twitter CEO Dick Costolo joins us for his take on lofty tech valuations and to talk about a new investment in health tech. All of those stories in a moment, but first, U.S. stocks climbing today on stimulus bets as Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell congratulated President-elect Biden for the very first time publicly and is meeting with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on a stimulus package as we speak. Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle has more on the market day from New York. Abigail, how did the markets respond to optimism around a new package?
You know, a new package and also Moderna's vaccine. The fact that we early today, before the open, had the positive news that the FDA has found their COVID-19 vaccine to be safe and effective, that really set the bullish tone. And all day stocks traded higher. The S&P 500 closing up 1.3%. Its best day in 3 weeks, and a really nice broad-based rally among the various sectors. The NASDAQ 100 finishing up almost as much, up 1%. You know, a real standout sector, star sector, technology today. Apple up 5%, the best day in 2 weeks, or 2 months, excuse me, Emily. And on an unusual report, Nikkei, which tends to be a little bit bearish on Apple, bullish today, saying that they see the company potentially raising their iPhone production by 30%. That's a huge amount. So you saw the whole iPhone, the Apple complex trading higher. Those chip suppliers such as Skyworks up 3.9%. So chips strong, tech strong, but financials, energy strong as well. And after hours, we have some exciting news, Emily. Advanced merger talks apparently between Tilray and Afria, so possibly some M&A in the cannabis space, and you can see both of these stocks soaring. On the year, though, Tilray is actually down pretty sharply, down 54%. So this probably comes as some relief to investors in this potentially hot space, at one point hot space, but this year having a difficult time. And then very interesting, Emily, we had stocks broadly climbing higher, but on the day, we had something similar to yesterday where the shares of Moderna and Pfizer both traded lower on the news, possibly some sell the news action here. Yesterday, of course, Pfizer's vaccine starting distribution here in the U.S. That stock yesterday down more than 4%, down 1.3% today. Moderna down more than 5% today. On that positive news, the expectation that the emergency authorization will be given on Thursday and hopefully distribution within, not the so far distant future. You have to make the point, though, Emily, Moderna up an incredible more than 600% on the year, so down 5%. The stock is still absolutely soaring on the year on vaccine optimism, Emily.
It has been an incredible rise. All right, Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle, thank you so much for that roundup. Continuing on the vaccine front now, the FDA, as Abigail said, says Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine is safe and effective. Next up, for that vaccine, an FDA advisory panel will be looking at data later this week, and a recommendation could lead to the vaccine being officially approved for use in the United States. To discuss, we're joined now by Noubar Afeyan, co-founder and chair of Moderna. Noubar, it's been so wonderful to hear updates from you personally over the last few weeks. Tell us what is the very latest. Where do things stand now between Moderna and the FDA?
Well, thanks, Emily. Thanks for having me. So today was another important step along the way to the upcoming Thursday meeting of the Advisory Committee of the FDA. Which will discuss the possibility of an emergency use authorization of the vaccine, which, following the precedent that was set last week of the further discussions and review, should hopefully produce an answer very soon after the meeting. And then after that, the Operation Warp Speed colleagues that we worked with for many months are poised and ready to get the vaccine, first doses of the vaccine out for healthcare workers and more broadly immediately. So we're very much awaiting that moment.
So if this is approved by Friday, how many doses do you believe will be shipped in that very first week to the United States?
I don't have the very specifics because that's a bit changing as well, depending on what day it is, because we're producing the vaccine as well. But what we said publicly, Emily, is that there will be some 20 million doses prepared by Moderna for shipment in December if we can get the emergency use authorization. So that's the number that we've been working towards. Of course, a subset of those will go out first, several million doses, followed by shipments, repeat shipments thereafter to fulfill that goal.
Now, Moderna has said you could potentially make up to 1 billion doses by the end of next year. How many of that billion doses do you think, based on what you're seeing in the supply chain, you will actually be able to make?
We've said that we are poised to make 500 million to 1 billion doses. Under different circumstances, we may be on the high end of that. We'll also be watching for demand. One of the things, Emily, that none of us knew as recently as a month ago, and we still don't know over the next few weeks and months, is just how many of the vaccines will actually get over the finish line, show not only safety, but efficacy sufficient for broad adoption. And that in turn will have a role to play in dictating how much volume each of the vaccine manufacturers needs to make and can make. So the capacity is one thing, the utilization will be another. So we've been thinking in the 500 million to billion range, maybe in the middle of that, but it's still early for us to determine exactly where that'll be. We've certainly made a lot of upfront investments to be in a position to reach those goals should we need to.
Okay, so if you can share any more details about capacity, then are there any particular ingredients that are in, let's say, short supply, or do you have everything you need to get to that, 750, maybe a billion doses based on what you're seeing right now?
Based on what we're seeing right now and the volumes that we've already committed to with our partners, the governments that have already pre-ordered vaccine and that we foresee ordering in the near future, we have certainly the supply chain in place. Again, let me commend the close collaboration with our OWS colleagues who played an important role in securing some of the key items that we needed help with, making sure we get in a timely way. And so I think the system is in place. Of course, there may be disruptions, there may be surprises, but right now I think certainly the 200 million doses that have so far been secured by the US government and whatever we foresee for the rest of the world, we're in a pretty good position to make. And the key supplies are being secured, have been secured. And as we go along, we may increase those.
Your production, which has been an incredible feat, has been watched with great fascination. How has Moderna been able to get such a leg up on Pfizer in producing more doses of a similar vaccine in initial weeks? What's been the secret sauce?
Well, Emily, I can't speak to the specifics of what Pfizer's been doing, but I hold the company in the highest regard, being quite an old established company with vast resources and vast expertise. This vaccine, the messenger RNA vaccine, is something that Moderna has been working on for almost 7-8 years, and the whole technology we've worked on for 10 years. And as the pioneers in this space, as you may know, we spoke earlier about this, we have experience across 10 different human vaccines that we've tried in trials and are currently being pursued for other diseases. All of that, all of the 10 years of expertise, the hundreds of millions we'd invested in production, in optimization, all have supported us in what we've been trying to do in a very short time frame, which is to scale what is an unprecedented vaccine. But it comes on the heels of significant technology, process development, analytical investments we've made, among them being how to make sure that we can store our vaccine at conditions minus 20 degrees centigrade that are more compatible with vast distribution than would have otherwise been the case. 5 years ago, we had processes that also needed to be kept at ultra frozen conditions down in the minus 70, minus 80 degree range. I'd say that's an important part. The other important part is the people. We're fortunate to have attracted some of the most experienced people in this industry under the leadership of Juan Andres, who came to us from many, many years, if not decades of experience at Novartis. And the leadership he and his broad team provided was, in fact, absolutely essential for a small company. Usually small companies have less experienced leadership, and when put to this kind of test, everything is being done for the first time. Well, here, they had done this before in prior pandemics even,
Right.
but simply not at Moderna.
Did your work with the NIH and Operation Warp Speed help potentially smooth out the process at all, like the onboarding of manufacturing facilities, perhaps?
Our work with the NIH was primarily in the vaccine development itself, the science underlying the spike protein that's been well covered, and of course the years of work we've done together on evaluating mRNA as a rapid response technology, and that has been well described and much appreciated by us and every single person who will receive our vaccine. OWS, on the other hand, has been deeply involved in supporting and advising the work that Moderna has done in preparing itself to produce at these scales and to distribute, and that has been essential. I cannot overstate the central role it played. General Perna, Moncef Slaoui, and their whole organization, I think, played an important role. It's unfortunate that we've been in a rather politicized environment where every single action ends up being interpreted multiple ways. But when you strip all that away, hopefully we'll come out of a political environment relatively soon. What they have done is an essential part of where we are today.
Now, what are your plans for unblinding the study? And given, for example, the folks who were given the placebo, the actual vaccine, is that something that would happen immediately?
Emily, that's a topic that is being actively discussed, as you may have seen last week in the previous VRBPAC meeting. I'm sure it'll be discussed in the upcoming VRBPAC meeting, and that's something that we will determine jointly with the FDA in concert, because what we want to do is make sure, on the one hand, we get the emergency supplies of the vaccine out. On the other hand, we ensure that the proper licensure eventually is granted so that we can broadly distribute the vaccine. And yet we need to take care of considerations that balance what is fair and ethical for the participants of our trial and other considerations. So it's something that will yet be discussed and finalized, and as soon as that's determined, it'll obviously be made publicly available.
Now, there are some lingering concerns about side effects and reactions. The FDA says it can't rule out a relationship between the vaccine and Bell's palsy. Obviously, this would be in an incredibly rare instance. But what do you have to say to people out there who might have these concerns in the back of their mind?
I think the key is to follow medical advice, collect as much information as possible, and keep in mind that any treatment, any vaccine, in fact, much of what we do in life is a trade-off between known risks and unknown risks. In this case, we have two known risks: exposure to a virus that has significant and in some cases severe consequences on health, or some conditions, some rare side effects that may be seen and have been studied and compared between various trials and the placebo groups. And so all of that information goes into the FDA's determination, the advisors' recommendations, and then the medical profession looking at all that and making suggestions across the board to their patients, their colleagues, and all of that has to be taken together. I think it's fair for people to be very thoughtful about this, but in the end, it's not as though we can wish this virus away. We're going to have to protect ourselves broadly. We think that a vaccine is an effective molecular mask of sorts. We talk about the mask being the best vaccine. I think pretty soon we're going to be talking about a vaccine being the best mask in the sense that it's onboarded and it protects us through our immune system. So long way of saying, Emily, I think these are fair questions, but they have answers, and they're all in trading the risks of infection and its consequences with the risks inherent in any vaccine, including these ones.
All right, Noubar Afeyan, co-founder and chair of Moderna, thank you so much for joining us. We'll all be anxiously following that meeting that the FDA will have on Thursday about Moderna. All right, coming up, the EU cracking down on U.S. technology, unveiling new rules in an attempt to halt the spread of harmful content and improve competition. Our conversation with Margrethe Vestager of the European Commission next. This is Bloomberg. All right, we've been getting some developments out of the stimulus meeting that has been happening between House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Kevin McCarthy, House Minority Leader, saying he thinks there's been progress after the meeting. They've been taking a quick break and we'll be going back at it. But again, we're following stimulus talks happening between both sides of Congress, and we'll bring you more developments as we have them. Meantime, the European Union is unveiling sweeping new rules for U.S. tech giants with threats of billion-dollar fines and even potential breakups. Margrethe Vestager, European Commission Executive Vice President, says the harsh consequences are, quote, justifiable. She spoke earlier with Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo in Brussels.
Well, what we worry about is competition and a fair marketplace. And we have been consulting extensively. We've been talking with, everyone. We've had experts, member states, parliaments, businesses, organizations. What they worry about is being able to do fair business. And what they worry about is too much illegal content, both product and services. So this is our worry. And of course, we are balancing things, which is why we think that this is, quite a proportionate proposal.
And when you were explaining some of the measures, you said that this is not targeting anyone in particular and that you hope you don't have to fine anyone, but nonetheless you could see 10% fine over your revenue here. Is that something that you're looking to do as a measure if needed, however?
Well, I think that anyone would want to comply with legislation that has been passed by our legislature here, the Parliament, the Council. Why wouldn't you want to do that? But it's also good to have an incentive. And the incentive of a fine of 10% of your turnover, I think that's a good incentive.
And can we read that perhaps as a warning too?
Well, the strange thing is that in my work as competition law enforcer, I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of practices that has been really damaging for other businesses. Now we say sort of in general, well, these are the things that you must do. These are the things that you should not do. And I think it will bring a better balance into the marketplace. And that is what we need. Because this is actually a bit more than just competition law enforcement and making that general. This is also beyond addressing unfair trading practices. And we have seen that no matter how vigilant we are in competition law enforcement, we need to work hand in hand with regulation in order to have an open and contestable market.
And one of the things you said is that in terms of the gatekeepers or companies that may have too big a position in the market, if that was needed, you could look into potentially breaking up or asking a company to disinvest and split up their business. That is something that investors really worry about and look at that as almost a nuclear option. Is that the nuclear option for you, or are you willing to use that too if needed?
Well, I think that we will have compliance because I think it's proportional, it's reasonable. It's actually what you would expect if you're an investor, that the business that you invest in actually is by the book. If they're not, then it is fines and other fines, repeated fines, behavioral commitments. But there is the option eventually to ask for a divestiture, splitting up a company. I would not expect that we should go there, but as a last resort, I find that it is justifiable.
Okay, so it's justifiable, but it's not something that you're looking to do anytime soon.
No, of course not. What we want is an open, contestable marketplace where businesses can find their customers. This is what we want to achieve.
You also say moving away from competition, that internet that really controls some of the information that goes on, and especially the fake news and really some stuff that is clearly not factual and could confuse the public is equally important for the Europeans. I wonder specifically with Facebook, we've seen a lot of fake news when it comes to COVID, the vaccine and so on. What are they telling you in terms of A, how quickly they're going to take it down, and are they going to be held liable at one point for that content?
Well, actually, I think that we have had quite a good cooperation with a number of the platforms to make sure that when people are looking for information about COVID and the pandemic and vaccines, that they get sort of official vetted information. So this will not regulate content. But if a member state, for instance, say, well, this is illegal, well, then if you are flagged, this is illegal, you have to take it down. But the other thing is they also have to tell the people who were behind it, we have taken down your content. Do you want to complain about it? Because just as well as it's important for us that what is illegal offline is also taken down as illegal online, freedom of expression is obviously also key.
Margaret Vestager there, European Commission Executive Vice President. All right, still ahead, we're going to bring you some of the top tech trends and stories to watch of 2020 in our new segment, Power Up. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Gurman with Bloomberg Technology, and on this week's Power Up, I'm looking at products that stood the test of 2020. While 2020 was a horrific year for so many people, it did push technology even further into the forefront of many of our lives by being key for people working, studying, communicating, and even working out from home. No tech company exemplified COVID-19 related demand, though, more than Peloton this past year. Last quarter, the company's sales grew over 230% from the period in the year before, showing just how much demand there is for the company's bikes and treadmills. Several weeks ago, the company announced a cheaper bike that comes in at under $1,900. That's a couple $100 shy of the new higher-end Bike Plus. Peloton also announced a cheaper treadmill, coming in at about $2,000 less than the higher-end Tread Plus. But that new model doesn't launch in the US until the end of March. But Peloton wasn't the only one to find success in this very challenging year. Apple made record revenue from several products and services, and it transformed nearly its entire product lineup. It added 5 new iPhone models, a bunch of new iPads, new Macs with its own processors, the new HomePod Mini, and new accessories like the MagSafe Duo Charger and AirPods Max headphones. Of course, Apple's competitors didn't let the iPhone maker have all the fun. Amazon launched a new home security camera that flies around like a drone, new car and home security kits, multiple new Echo speakers, and it released its Alexa-controlled eyeglasses to all interested buyers. Google launched a new $100 Nest Audio speaker, the Pixel 5 phone line with 5G, and a new Chromecast TV dongle. Facebook launched the Quest 2 VR headset, while Xbox and Sony PlayStation also debuted their next-generation consoles, which are surely to dominate for years to come. With 2021 looking like another year of mostly remote learning and working, these technologies will continue to play critical roles in many of our lives. I'm Mark Gurman. This is Power Up.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. The mental health industry is receiving a lot of venture attention as companies recognize their remote workforces need more support now than ever. One company seeing a spike in demand in the pandemic is Modern Health, a platform that provides mental health care solutions for employees. The company just raised an additional $51 million in new funding. Joining us now for more, O1 Advisors co-founder and managing partner Dick Costello, one of the investors in Modern Health, and of course also the former CEO of Twitter. Dick, good to have you back on the show. There are a lot of new opportunities out there in health tech, in biotech. Why did you decide to double down on Modern Health?
We just love well, I would say a couple of things. First of all, I'll back up a bit. You know, one of the great things about having run Twitter at scale with over 4,000 employees is you get to see where after you leave, you know, some of your most amazing employees go. And one of Adam Bain's go-to-market leaders and one of the great leaders on the product team at Twitter both ended up at Modern Health. So when that happened, we realized we needed to get to know the company. I would say, secondly, there's just been a massive trend toward adding mental health services as one of the pillars of corporate benefits programs alongside physical health, obviously dental and vision. But like physical health, more and more realization that wellness, overall wellness and stress can be such a hit on employee productivity. And it's not just you're sick or you're fine. There's a whole spectrum of health and wellness. So we just have seen, and we saw at Twitter, and we've seen from other companies that we work with, this need to extend employee benefits programs to mental health services, including everything from full-on one-on-one sessions with therapists to group coaching sessions and other kinds of software modules that services can provide. And Modern Health is a company that provides the entire spectrum of those services. We love the team, as I just mentioned. We had 2 of our Twitter leaders there, and the combination of the team, their accelerating growth, and the secular trend in the industry made it a no-brainer for us.
The pandemic is one thing, but, we're expecting this work from home period to extend for some people and some companies indefinitely. I mean, Jack Dorsey has told employees that they can work from home forever. I mean, how concerned are you going forward about making sure that employees have the support they need, given, the fact that many of them are going to have been staring at the same 4 walls and the same screen for at least the last 9 months, if not years to come?
Yeah, I think that even you just said it, when we come out of the pandemic, there's certainly been a realization that you can be productive from anywhere for lots of kinds of jobs. And that's not going to go away completely. We're not going to see 100% of people returning to offices. And I think, look, you unless you were on another planet, you can realize the stress that everyone's been under the last 9-10 months. Lack of human connection, not just staring at the same 4 walls, but homeschooling, the stress of trying to be a parent who's schooling your kids at home while also having a job. It's just added to compounded the usual stress of working really hard at a fast-growing company and dealing with the day-to-day grind of your job. Look at the amount of productivity that's lost in sick days and leaves of absence and all that other, and burnout that every company has experienced. So we just think that this is, COVID has only accelerated this, the demand for the services, the stress that employees are under, and I don't think that goes away when the pandemic is behind us.
Now, you've been investing for a few years now since leaving Twitter, and I'm curious, going into 2021 in this unprecedented environment, where are you placing your bets at O1?
Remarkably enough, considering that Adam and I, built what I guess many would consider a consumer platform, Twitter, even though the business was really B2B, it's us selling to advertisers and other businesses. We're sort of agnostic to where we invest in technology. We're probably not doing a lot in hardware because we don't understand supply chains that well. And one of the things Adam and I really try to focus on is going into places and investing where we can help mitigate execution risk and help with scaling. But in the software space, we have tended to invest more in enterprise SaaS companies. Those just happen to be the kinds of companies that we've come across and loved. Maybe it's the fact that we have we know more about consumer tech, so we know the right questions to ask and find reasons to say no to more consumer tech companies. But we've ended up investing more in enterprise SaaS without really a preference for it. And that'll probably continue. There's so much momentum in the space. I think some people have thought the party is over in enterprise SaaS, but there's so many other problems that need to be solved. Every company in the world is becoming a technology company or needs to become a technology company. So the total addressable market for some of these enterprise SaaS companies is huge. I think if you had looked at companies like Twilio, Okta, et cetera, maybe 5 years ago, you would have said, well, sure, they're a couple $1 billion companies, but they can never be 10 or $20 billion companies. Well, now they're 10 and $20 billion companies and growing and growing and growing. These kinds of companies can grow forever. They're snowballs rolling down a hill, and we love them.
So let's talk about that. Wish is poised to go public tomorrow. The e-commerce retailer, they just priced their IPO $24 a share at the top of the range. I'm sure you've been following Airbnb and DoorDash. Airbnb and DoorDash both pulling back over the last few days after their exuberant receptions on Wall Street. Even Brian Chesky was at a loss for words when we told him that the shares had doubled at the opening. Are these valuations in line with potential, or are they insane?
Yeah, Brian's experience gave me PTSD. I had the same reaction the morning of our IPO. Look, I think that the markets, are private and public, are underpricing risk. Meaning, valuations are high, and I say that because you have the sort of hard Brexit, right around the corner. What looks like that's going to be really, really rough for the UK, meaning no deal Brexit. The political strife in the US, the ongoing political strife in the US, this K-shaped recovery with, depending on what the next stimulus package is, lots of benefits running out, lots of evictions from landlords right around the corner in January. So the market seems to be ignoring all that, which I think is weird, but it's been that way for a number of years now. Having said all that, we've been talking about valuations being too high for 10 years now almost. I remember, you can go back, give you just a couple examples. When Figma raised their Series B, the WYSIWYG design platform, for those unfamiliar with it, a couple of years ago, people thought the valuation was crazy based on the annualized run rate. It probably, any external observer who didn't know the business or understand the future of design would have looked at that and said those investors were insane. Well, that now looks cheap. So I think that those kinds of things happen. And then the experience with one or two of them makes people not want to miss out on the next one. And they pile into the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh company at big numbers, and they're not all going to work out. So I think overall, the markets, public and private, are underpricing risk, but they've been doing it for a while and no one's gotten hurt by it. So it's going to continue to happen until there's a big 20 to 25% correction.
Okay, so do you see a correction coming? I mean, are you telling your entrepreneurs, raise now while you can?
No, because
is this going to go on for a few years?
Well, I'll tell you precisely what we tell them. Sort of the same thing we told them I would say a couple weeks into March during the shelter in place. So look, make sure you've got an operating plan that you could move to in the immediate future. That's a 25% cut to OpEx on a, what if there's a massive externality that comes alongside this pandemic that tells us everything's shutting down, budgets are shutting down. Make sure you've got that plan in place so that if something like that happens, you're ready to move to it instantly. Obviously, a lot of companies found themselves in the position where they had to move to it instantly, Airbnb being one of them. And of course, as we all know, in hindsight, they came right back and grew faster than ever. So what we've told CEOs and CFOs is put a plan in place, put a what if plan in place. That's if we need to cut OpEx by 25% going forward and make sure we've got enough runway for X months, X years, what does that look like? And let's be able to move to it quickly and nimbly if that happens. But, I think it's hard to just say, do it now, everything's great. As I've just mentioned, for 4 years, it seemed like the market is underpriced risk, and here we are higher than ever.
Now, scrutiny is rising on big tech, and the FTC just sued Facebook, suggesting Instagram and WhatsApp that those acquisitions should be unwound. As somebody who competed against Facebook for a very long time, what do you think? Is Facebook too powerful? Is it anti-competitive? Is a breakup in order?
I had the most awesome wavy set of hair before I started competing against Mark at Facebook. I think that all the tech companies, I won't just comment on one of them. I think that all the tech companies are under increasing regulatory scrutiny. I think that's going to be a global reality for all of them. The challenge for these companies is they don't really cooperate. There might be some cooperation between teams, but because they compete so directly and generally and so fiercely, and in many cases for talent, for customers, et cetera, they just don't get together and share information or work together and collaborate like competitors in some other industries do, where there's an industry lobby, and what have you. So the challenge for these companies is they're kind of going in one against many against all these governments, and not collaborating, and that's going to result in making it, I think, easier for regulators to come after them. The companies won't know necessarily what each other are saying, what each other are doing. They're probably saying things like, you shouldn't come after me for anti-competitive practices. Here's a list of the 9 things, Apple or Google or Twitter is doing. So I just think that's going to not serve them well, and going to be a problem for the industry in general, and going to result in many of them being more strictly regulated than we're even talking about today.
Now, President Trump has spent much of his time in office using Twitter, exhausting Twitter employees, I'm sure, accusing the company of anti-conservative bias, arguing for Section 230 to come to an end. What is your outlook for Twitter under a Biden administration? Does the drama die down when he leaves office?
The drama never dies down at Twitter. That's the reality. Look, it'll just be every user of the platform has 10 great ideas that are obvious to that user that Twitter should do to quote unquote fix Twitter. And they usually include silencing voices that think things differently than they do, or engaging in the prohibition of speech that they think should be prohibited. And the company has to balance those hundreds of millions of strong points of view about what those 10 obvious things are that each and every individual user thinks need to be done immediately. So it's probably not gonna make life just a bowl of cherries over there, because there's always gonna be some next issue that the company has to deal with that we don't know about today. And it will be a new kind of issue that the industry hasn't had to think about before and will struggle with. That just happened sort of every couple months when I was running Twitter, and that was before Donald Trump was even running for president. So, probably it's a little easier on them because you won't have someone who's got them directly in their sights, who's shouting at them every day. But the drama won't go away, and there will be some other set of issues that come up that the company will have to deal with, and it will continue on a regular basis, like for the foreseeable future.
I had a feeling you might say something like that. Dick, always appreciate your frank and sharing your prior experiences with us. Dick Costello, co-founder of O1 Advisors, former CEO of Twitter. Thanks for coming back on the show. All right, coming up, SolarWinds, a Texas-based software maker, has suddenly become the epicenter of the most sprawling cyber attack on the U.S. government in recent memory. What is SolarWinds, and why did hackers target them? We're going to find out next. This is Bloomberg. Government agencies and major corporations outside the United States are reviewing their computer systems for signs of security breaches. This after the U.S. government was hit by one of the most audacious cyber attack campaigns that inserted malware into software updates from Texas-based company SolarWinds. Joining me now for more, Bloomberg cybersecurity reporter William Turn. So, William, what is SolarWinds, and why did hackers target them?
So SolarWinds, simply put, is an IT company. They make a product called SolarWinds Orion, which allows organizations and companies to kind of monitor this. A lot of people I've spoken to have said it's really useful software. You can see when a server or router goes down. But because of the nature of this software, it peers really directly into a network and has a lot of access. So that means that if you were, say, a Russian intelligence agency trying to sneak a secret piece of malware into all of the U.S. federal government, well, SolarWinds would actually be a really great place to start because, they provide their services to all 5 branches of the U.S. military, countless federal government agencies, more than 400 of the Fortune 500. So, this is kind of an ingenious hack they pulled off and kind of one of the great feats of cyber espionage that we've seen in a long time.
Is this a sort of tried and true methodology, or is this something new, the way that this was executed?
So, this has actually been kind of a problem in cybersecurity for as long as I can remember. If you can hack something that, as part of the update tool, right, you can kind of trick, in a way, your target into accidentally downloading malware, right? You think about updating your iPhone, right? You download the update from the internet, but if someone can get in the middle of that update and inject malicious code into it, you're unknowingly downloading a virus or malware into your system.
So how many government agencies at this point were the hackers able to infiltrate, and how damaging was the ultimate attack?
Well, that's a great question, Emily, because we don't know. We're still learning. We first learned, Reuters reported on Sunday about the Treasury Department, and every day since we've learned about new agencies that have been targeted. So we've learned about Treasury, we've learned about DHS, State Department, Pentagon, and more almost certainly will come out. And as far as the damage goes, it's impossible to say. We just don't know right now. But, this attack has been going on since at least March. But, it's hard to know exactly when they got to which agency and how, what they took and why.
What has the U.S. government response been so far?
So it's kind of been a mixed bag. The head of the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, Chris Krebs, you might recall, was fired by Donald Trump by tweet for accurately stating the election results. So the head of the agency that would be in charge of, coordinating the response to this got fired by Trump a month ago. The National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, is cutting short an international trip and coming back for an emergency meeting with the National Security Council. I think they're kind of coordinating an all-of-government response, hopefully. The intelligence community, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence just put out a statement saying that they're working on the response. But, it kind of remains to be seen exactly how well that's going.
All right, Bloomberg's William Turton, thank you so much for that update. It's certainly fascinating as we get more details about how this hack was pulled off. All right, coming up, a much anticipated podcast is set to debut on Spotify next year, produced and hosted by a couple that's recently tried to stay out of the public eye. That is next. This is Bloomberg. What's ahead for entertainment in the new year? Well, a royal welcome, you could say. Spotify is teaming up with Prince Henry and the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, to produce and host a podcast. With me now for more, our Bloomberg News entertainment reporter, Lucas Shaw in LA. So Lucas, tell us everything we know. Everything you know. How will this work?
Everything you know so far is just a little bit, but it is still big news for Spotify. The company announced this morning that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex would be hosting and producing shows and their company had signed a multi-year deal with Spotify, and that the first of those shows would arrive sometime next year. They didn't say much beyond that, but I think, I'm starting to look at this sort of like, Harry and Meghan are following the Obama playbook, where first they had the Netflix deal, now they have the Spotify deal. And they're using kind of their fame and their influence to make projects that both mean something to them and potentially entertain viewers and listeners at home.
So how much are Harry and Meghan themselves going to be involved? How much are we going to hear their voices? How much are we going to see of their personality?
Spotify didn't say a ton beyond the fact that they would be involved in hosting. And my hunch is that there will be at least one show that's sort of like the Michelle Obama podcast. The Obamas signed this overall deal with Spotify, and their first show was Michelle talking to some of her friends and other people that interested her. There was journalist Michelle Norris. There was comedian Conan O'Brien. So you could see Meghan do something similar to that, or they may decide to host a show in which they explore some topic that is of interest. The world is sort of their oyster in that regard. I can't imagine that they're going to be full-time podcasting. In addition to the deal that they signed with Netflix, they have a philanthropic fund. They have family to worry about potentially in the long term. And so I think it's just kind of one of many parts of their media arsenal.
And Netflix has clearly had a banner year, even given the production issues caused by the pandemic. New shows keep coming. There just was a new season of The Crown, which sort of made me wonder, is there any awkwardness given that The Crown, which is, a pretty brutal take on the royal family. Did that impact this deal at all?
It did not. It didn't seem to stop them from taking Netflix's money, although very few things do these days. The next season of The Crown is the one that I assume will deal with Diana's death, and there will be a season after that, which one assumes would deal with her children. It could get a little sticky then, but again, this is a case where Netflix has written a large check for the two royals to kind of do whatever they want.
Well, as somebody who watches The Crown with great fascination, definitely wondering what their take will be on the modern day royals. Bloomberg's Lucas Shaw, who covers entertainment for us in LA. Lucas, thank you so much for that update. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia coming up next. This is Bloomberg.